The views of the host of this video are his alone. Uncommon sense is used, and he doesn't swear or rant. Keep it classy, YouTube. Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Orstorm here. I know I said I wouldn't do another video this week, but this was something I've been kind of working on wanting to do anyways. I thought about doing some ban list banter videos, but I thought I'd just summarize all my thoughts on the ban list coming up in July in one video. Now, this will be a little bit longer, but if you like my content, that's not really an issue for you. So we'll talk about some cards that I think, are going to stay banned for whatever reason, or should be banned, or whatnot. So the first cards we're going to talk about are Stratos and Heavy. Now, these two cards were banned on the same list, October 2013. The problem with these cards coming back is there's a particular Konami employee who is the main reason why these two cards are banned. He's also the same guy who kept Bestiari at 1 for 5 years. So pretty much until he decides these cards are good for the game, they'll come back. But considering he left Bestiari at 1 until the recent ban list, and it was like 2 or 3 years past its prime, I'd say these cards are pretty we may never see them back unless 2 or 3 years down the road. So these two cards are pretty safe to stay on the ban list. I don't want to do a whole video discussing this particular employee, but he seems like he's got a really closed-minded mindset. Now, as far as cards I would ban, now the whole chicken race FTK thing is a problem, I think, for the game in general, because I think people talk about Magical Explosion, they talk about Life Equalizer, but I think the whole source of this particular card is the problem, and typically, if you look at Konami's history, they do hit FTKs before they even become legal. If you look at the Morphing Jar Jackpot 7 FTK, Morphing Jars were banned on the April 2014 list before Jackpot 7 came out. And there was a video Yu-Gi-Oh! For Real Men did. It was fairly consistent, so they banned the Morphing Jars before the Jackpot 7 was even legal. And I think we could see a similar thing with the Chicken Race FTK. We could see something, but I think the most solid thing to hit is Royal Magical Library, because there's really not a skillful way to play this card. I mean, and plus with so many more Pendulum decks coming out, like Ignites and stuff like that can abuse this card, I think it's safe to just go ahead and ban it. It's not like I want it to be banned, but it's probably got to go. The time has come to hit it on the ban list. I've been wondering why it's been legal for so long. It's pretty much a staple in every FTK, in a lot of FTK decks. Now, as far as Necros, this is kind of something questionable, but I think Brio is probably safe to say at 2 for the time being, because it did just get hit, but I think the card that's probably going to hit next is Unicorn, because Unicorn is probably the most powerful card in the entire archetype, because you can pitch it for any Necros monster, or spell, even, and it's basically a 1-for-1 Necros, anything you need from your graveyard, but then it's a walking floodgate for extra deck monsters. And that includes Pendulums as well, if they're special summoned from the extra deck, not from the hand, of course, but I think this card is just, I don't really like archetype-specific floodgates in general, but I think this is probably the next card to go for Necros. As far as Manju and Senju, I think Konami tried hitting them in the OCG, and it didn't really do the job, and it hurt a lot of the other ritual decks. So if anything, I would say Manju could go maybe to semi-limited. I think don't hit Senju. Manju's probably more of a problem than Senju. But Konami hit Tour Guide instead of hitting BA last ban list, which I'm still a little mad about. So these two cards are probably, cards that I think should stay where they're at. And speaking of Burning Abyss, I look at Burning Abyss as a deck, and I think the clear problems are Dante and the original two, Groff and Seer are obviously the problem, but I think Dante is like the source of all the problems. I think the Fire Lake loop, while it's not as consistent with Tour Guide at 1, I feel like something's got to happen. I mean, the deck just doesn't die, and I think it's not like Ying Zings, none of their stuff ever misses timing. And this deck is also a TCG exclusive, so there's really we don't have any OCG thing to know what will happen with this deck. But since it's a meta deck, I think the safest thing to do would just semi-limit, or maybe even limit Dante, and maybe hit the Groff and Sir, which are the other problems, because Fire Lake is only as the problem with Tour Guide was that she set up an instant +1 Fire Lake play. So I feel like if you hit the Burning Abyss cards, you can probably take some. Now, Tour Guide is a card I'm biased about. I think I should be able to minimum play 2 copies, but it's a thing. I'm going to talk about a few other cards. I'm going to talk about Denko Seika and Thunder King Raiho now. Thunder King is a card that's been at 1 as long as I think I've been playing Yugioh, since I don't know the exact timeline, but I started around Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy, and this card was at 1 during that format, so it kind of gives you an idea how long this card's been at 1. Especially when we have something like Denko Seika, both cards effectively lock you out of certain mechanics. Denko doesn't let you use your back row, and Thunder King says you can't search. Now, the difference between these two cards is that Thunder King has a second effect where it can negate a inherent summon, such as an Exceed summon. And it also can be special summon, which Denko cannot. And it is a 1900 beater. So my thought is, if we can have 3 Denkos, why can't we have, 2 to 3 Thunder Kings? Try it, because Mistake's at 3, and it's everywhere right now. People don't play Thunder King because Mistake does what Thunder King does. So why not, try Thunder King at 2, see how it does. As far as my gal Tour Guide, I wish she was at 2. Tour Guide's one of my, again, these 3 cards are probably the 3 cards I'm most biased about on this ban list, so I just want Tour Guide back at 2, because my Dark Worlds really miss her, so, but I feel like if you hit Burning Abyss, eventually Tour Guide is just one of those cards that's going to fluctuate on and off the list. It's just the way it is, but I wish Tour Guide was at 2. And then talk a little bit about Rhoda now. Warrior decks are my thing, so I will say that I do not think, logically I will say Rhoda will probably not get hit because we have Ignites coming out, and Konami wants that deck to be consistent. And it still could be, because Summoner's Art is also a thing. But Rhoda is starting to become more of a problem, because I understand why they bumped it to 3. They really wanted to push Noble Knights in that box set they had, but I don't know. I feel like Rhoda will stay at 3 for the time being. We could see it go down to semi or even limited back again at some point, because it was at 1 for quite a long time. We're going to talk a little about some other rogue decks, like Wind Up Magician, and we're going to talk a little bit about Zenmaity. Now, the reason this Zenmaity is banned is mostly because these 2 cards were involved in this silly hand loop, where if you've played during that format, you understand you wouldn't have a hand. And the big source of this problem is Wind Up Hunter. So what the OCG did is they banned Wind Up Hunter and took Magician up to 3, and I think Carrier is currently at 2. So if you ban Wind Up Hunter, you bring Wind-Ups to full power. They don't have Shockmaster like they do in the OCG, so they won't really do anything. As far as other cards I could see getting hit, so Tellarknight Trevor, I don't think it is going to hit yet, but this is going to be the first card to go for Tellarknight players, because this card is the problem, I think, for the entire deck, because it's just generically bouncing everything, and at 2, if you can't hit it to 2, because the loop is still possible, so if you hit it to 1, it'll make Tellarknight players actually have to do something other than Trevor loops. So I think hitting Trevor to 1 is probably the safest thing to do with Tellarknights. I think it's the most fair hit, because it's their most unfair card. As far as Shadal's, I think I would leave them alone for another list, but I would say maybe bump Construct down to 2, but Shadal's haven't really done as much as they have in preview. They did as much as they did during the Duelist Alliance format, so I would say I'd probably still maybe leave Construct alone for at least one more format. Talk about a few other, in sectors, Dragonfly is still a powerful card, but I think, why not hit Hornet up to multiples and test how it goes, and maybe put Dragonfly up as well. Dragonfly is obviously the more powerful of the 2, but I would say, bring them up to 2 to test, see what happens. If it doesn't work, reban them like they did with Snatch Steal. These things aren't really complicated. Trag should go to 3. I think Gores is at 3, doesn't really need much of an explanation. Yes, Trag can steal monsters, but that's a pretty situational thing at best. And Grand Mole coming to maybe 2 or even 3. At this point, now I understand why Grand Mole's at 1. It creates its own loop where you can keep bouncing your opponent's monster, and it's quite annoying to deal with. But it's also very easy to stop, because we have so many battle traps right now. We have so much effect negation. And then if you Fiendish it, your opponent just sits there and is like, what do I do now? So I feel like Grand Mole is a pretty safe card to come up to 2 or even 3 at this point. And next we're going to talk a little bit about Glow Up Bowl. I'm saving the deck to make sure it doesn't, disconnect. So talk a little bit about Glow Up Bowl. Glow Up Bowl is, why is it not at 3? Spore's at 3. They took Spore off the list and put it to 1. Glow Up Bowl doesn't need to be at 1 anymore. Talk a little bit about Debris Dragon. And this is a card people, honestly, I think Konami forgot it was on the list. It was at 2 during Dragon Ruler format, and then when Dragon Rulers got hit, they also hit Debris Dragon, was one of the other cards that got hit along with all the other stuff. So you look at Debris Dragon, it's still at 1, even though the Dragon Rulers are gone. And the main reason is it was a very, very good search target for Tempest. But now that Tempest is banned, why not bump it up to 2? I mean, yeah, it can grab a Dandy out of the graveyard, but it has pretty restrictive summoning restrictions. You can only make Dragon-type Synchro monsters with it. And it does have some... Other than Dandy, though, does it really have any... Dandy's also at 1, so, you know, why not bump the Redragon up to multiples? It shouldn't be at 1 anymore. And Monster Gate going to 2, this is similar to what Konami did on the January list, where they bumped Reasoning up to 3 to help Infernoids. This might be the same thing. They might bump Monster Gate maybe to 2 to test it. Gold Star going to 2, maybe? I understand Gold Star because stupid interactions with Necroface, but Necroface is still semi-limited, so... And the Dragon Rulers are gone, so... Yeah, it might help. It might make a few annoying zombie decks slightly more consistent, but you have to naturally draw Gold Sark. It's like any card, any one of, so... I feel like Gold Sark, he could bring it up to 2, and it wouldn't do much of anything. It might, some zombie players will rejoice, but it doesn't accomplish much. Talk about Spellbook of Fate. Now, I will say Judgment is still stupid OP, and I feel like it's a card that was only created because they created the Dragon Ruler, so it probably will have an eternal place on the ban list. But Fate, I don't know why it's still at 1, you know. Unlike Judgment, I think it's a lot more fair because it has pretty hefty cost. 3 Spellbook cards to banish a card on the field without targeting is a pretty hefty cost. And I understand, you know, having it at 1 is like having it at 3 because Spellbooks do so much searching and recycling, but just bump it to 2. You know, the Spellbooks will never really be the same because Judgment is gone, but, you know, at least throw them a bone. And Dragon Ravine, bump it to 3, Dragon Rulers are gone, you know, no reason for it still to be at 1. Help the Dragunity players out. Charge of Light Brigade possibly going to 3. I think the reason they put Charge to 2 last list was because they banned the Dragon Rulers, and the Dragon Rulers were a really big part of all Lightsworn. Like, Lightsworn Rulers, what made them consistent was the Dragon Rulers and Eclipse Wyvern, but now you can't do that with the Dragon Rulers gone. So why not just bump Charge to 3, you know, help out the... Advanced Ritual Art, bump it to 3, why is it still at 2? Sacred Swords of the 7 Stars, Dragon Rulers are gone, bump it to 3. And talk a little bit about a couple other cards real quick. We'll talk about Xian, you know, bump Xian to 3, you know, he didn't do much at 2, just take him to 3. It makes, same thing with, it's sort of the same thing I think about Gale, like bump Gale to 3. Then we'll talk about the errata cards for a bit, and this will be the last little bit of the video. I think all the errata cards except for Ring and Crush will probably come up to 3, because Ring and Crush instantly saw play after they came off the list, because they're still quite powerful cards, even with their new restrictions, but I feel like no one really played Temple of the Kings or Sinister Serpent or Exchange of the Spirit with their erratas. So why not just bump them to 3, you know? And I mean, outside of Volcanics and maybe like a trap monster deck, I really haven't found a ton of uses for Temple of the Kings, and I feel like at multiples it'll be a lot more useful. Sinister Serpent's not... They shouldn't have even errated him. He didn't even need it, but they did it, so just bump him to 3. Exchange of the Spirit's a lot more fair, but it's only a once per duel effect. It's the same thing with Blow Up Bulb, you know, bump it to 3. So, anyway, guys, I'd like to thank you for watching this video today. I really appreciate it when people watch my videos. Tune in on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays for more Yu-Gi-Oh! content. Anyway, guys, I'd like to thank you for watching. This is Orstorm, signing out. If you like what you saw in this video, feel free to follow me on any of my social media links in the description. Also, if you liked the content in this video, please subscribe. Every subscriber helps.